Love disguises itself as liberation in our modern world, yet beneath its honeyed promises lurks a silent machinery of power, desire, and deception. Nietzsche harbored deep suspicion toward romantic ideals, viewing love not as innocent surrender, but as a battlefield where masks, instincts, and wills wage their quiet wars. His haunting question persists: do we truly love the person before us, or merely the projection we cast upon them? In our age of instant connections and disposable relationships, this provocation rings more urgent than ever. Perhaps what we mistake for pure love is nothing more than a disguised quest for control and validation. What if loving were, above all else, an act of selfishness, an impulse to dominate and eternalize ourselves within another? These reflections invite not despair, but clarity. Nietzsche wrote not to comfort, but to strip away illusions. If you have ever felt that love wounds more than it heals, that it brings us close while simultaneously isolating us, this journey speaks to you. Should this kind of thinking resonate with your experience, subscribe to this channel and join our exploration through the brutal psychology of modern love through Nietzsche's lens. Nietzsche declared that humanity cannot bear naked truth about existence. What keeps us standing amid life's uncertainties and pain is not reality itself, but our capacity to construct illusions. Love stands as one of these fundamental illusions, perhaps the most powerful of all. It functions as a veil covering the essential loneliness of human beings, a solitude that ultimately can never be completely conquered. When we love, we project onto the other a meaning we lack within ourselves. We see in them the promise of redemption, healing, completeness. Yet this process contains nothing innocent. We do not see the person as they are, but as we need them to be. We create an image, a mirror reflecting our lacks and desires, and we cling to this projection as if it were truth. Love thus emerges as a vital self-deception. Without it, perhaps existence would become unbearable. With it, we can endure pain and even grant it meaning. Nietzsche does not entirely condemn this illusion. On the contrary, he recognizes that life requires it. The problem arises when we confuse illusion with reality. When we begin demanding that the other correspond to the fantasy we have invented. At this point, love transforms into suffering, because no one can indefinitely sustain the mask we project upon them. The collision between expectation and reality becomes inevitable. Consider how many relationships begin with almost magical enchantment. The person seems perfect. Every detail about them appears to answer some emptiness you carry. But with time, the veil begins to tear, and what appears behind it is a human being full of flaws, fears, and contradictions. Many cannot bear this encounter with reality. Then emerge the demands, the disappointments, the attempts to mold the other to our will. Love, which began as a promise of salvation, becomes a battlefield. Nietzsche perceived this with clarity. Love is a psychological necessity, but also dangerous territory. Within it we reveal our inability to be alone, our relentless search for something to fill the void that inhabits us. The cruel realization is that this void will never truly be filled. We can disguise it, we can forget it during moments of intense passion, but it always returns. Modern love, with all its haste and instant promises, only intensifies this dynamic. The more quickly we find someone, the more quickly we discover that the illusion cannot sustain itself. Some claim that loving means seeing the other as they really are. Nietzsche would laugh at this idea. For him, no such reality exists. What exists is always interpretation, filter, projection. To love is inevitably to create a shared fiction. Perhaps this is why love resembles art so closely. It invents, exaggerates, idealizes. We do not love truth, we love appearance. And if this appearance gives us strength to live, it fulfills its function. However, this vision also invites us toward a more lucid form of loving. Recognizing that love is illusion does not mean despising it. It means simply not deceiving ourselves about its nature. It means perceiving that in loving, we seek not only the other, but ourselves, the confirmation of our hopes. This clarity can make us less demanding, less cruel in our expectations of perfection. Nietzsche might tell us, "Love, but do not forget you are dreaming. Love, but do not make the other the bearer of your salvation. Love knowing that all passion is, in part, your own invention." This awareness does not destroy love, but makes it more truthful in its falsity. Is it cruel to think this way? Undoubtedly. But it is a liberating type of cruelty, because instead of expecting from the other what they cannot give us, we begin to look inward. We begin to perceive that solitude is inevitable, and that perhaps loving means simply learning to share this solitude without illusions of completeness. Love, in the end, is a beautiful lie we tell ourselves. A necessary lie, but still a lie. Accepting this is taking a step toward maturity. It means seeing the other not as savior, but as fellow traveler, equally fragile, equally lost. It means loving not despite the illusion, but through it, knowing that life needs these fictions to be bearable. Nietzsche proved relentless in pointing out what almost no one dares admit. When we love, we seek not merely to share, but to possess. Love is rarely just generous surrender. It carries in its essence a desire to mark territory, to declare this is mine. Behind every gesture of affection also exists an instinct of appropriation, an impulse toward dominance that manifests in subtle or violent forms. It feels uncomfortable to think this way because we were educated to believe in love as synonymous with altruism and purity. However, you need only observe yourself with honesty. When someone you love smiles at another person, do you not feel a pang of jealousy? When your partner dedicates time to something that does not involve you, does an almost irrational discomfort not arise? This feeling is not a sign of personal evil, but an expression of what Nietzsche would call the will to power, the vital tendency to expand, to affirm oneself, to dominate. In love, this will find its most beautiful mask, but it remains a struggle nonetheless. Jealousy, for example, is the naked portrait of this possessive instinct. It does not arise because the other belongs to us, in fact, but because we project upon them the idea of property. We love, and in loving, want to guarantee exclusivity, as if the presence and desire of the other should always remain under our control. And when something escapes this logic, we feel as if we are being robbed. The other becomes less a person and more an object of dispute. Nietzsche perceived that traditional romanticism concealed this truth. The idea of love as perfect fusion, as union of souls, masks the fact that in practice, each individual wants to conquer, impose, and maintain space. Romantic discourse speaks of surrender, but vital instinct seeks appropriation. Loving, in this sense, is not dissolving oneself in the other, but attempting somehow to imprison them within our orbit. This becomes even more evident in modern love. How many couples live monitoring social media, controlling whom the other talks to, where they are, what they do? There are apps that track location, shared passwords as proof of trust, incessant demands for attention. Under the pretext of love, a dynamic of surveillance and power installs itself, and if we look closely, we perceive that this need for control does not arise from trust, but from fear of losing possession. Nietzsche would have said, this is not a moral defect, but an inevitable consequence of how we are. Loving, for us, is almost never simply admiring the other freely, but desiring to bind them, fix them, keep them close forever. This impossibility of accepting others' freedom generates much of the suffering in relationships, because no one, however passionate they may be, can completely give up their individuality. The other always escapes, always has desires and thoughts not under our dominion. Here love reveals its cruel face. What we most desire in the other, their vitality, their freedom, their own brilliance, is also what most frightens us, because it cannot be contained. We want to possess what by nature is untamable. We want to transform into statue what only exists in movement, and therefore we suffer because love is, in part, a battle lost from the start. Nietzsche did not romanticize this struggle, but neither did he despise it. For him, the possessive instinct is part of life, and trying to suppress it completely would be an even greater illusion. The challenge lies not in eliminating it, but in recognizing it and dealing with it without hypocrisy. Loving someone does mean desiring that person to belong to us, but perhaps maturity consists in perceiving that this possession will never be total, and that attempting to force it only destroys what we seek to preserve. This can be seen in small daily gestures. A couple may love each other deeply, but if one tries to control every step of the other, love transforms into prison. When both recognize the temptation of possession and accept that freedom is inevitable, the bond becomes less suffocating. There is suffering, yes, but also an honesty that allows breathing. Nietzsche promised no easy solutions, but showed that facing reality is always more fruitful than hiding it behind false ideals. Thus, the possessive instinct in love is not a sign that we love wrongly, but that we love as human beings, imperfect, selfish, moved by the will to power. The error lies in denying this, in insisting on the fantasy of pure and disinterested love. The more we deny reality, the more it imposes itself in the form of sick jealousies, constant fights, and hidden resentments. The more we try to idealize, the more we frustrate ourselves with the inevitable. Perhaps the wisdom Nietzsche suggests is not eliminating possession, but accepting it as part of the equation, without letting it transform into tyranny. Loving someone is, in part, wanting to have them only for oneself. But truly loving may also mean allowing the other to remain free, even though this hurts. Between total possession and absolute freedom exists a tense space, and it is in this space that the human drama of love unfolds. Deep down, the question Nietzsche leaves us is disturbing. Do we love the person more, or the sensation of possessing them? This cruel doubt is the mirror where we must have courage to look at ourselves. Nietzsche used to say that truth is unbearable. Human beings cannot bear to face reality as it is. Therefore, they invent myths, symbols, illusions. Love is perhaps the greatest of all these stages, and in modern love, it has become a true performance. We do not love the other in their naked essence, but rather the mask they wear, and even more, the mask we ourselves project upon them. We live in a time when everything has become spectacle. Love does not escape this logic. Carefully edited profiles on social media, photos illuminated by filters, phrases rehearsed to appear spontaneous. The romantic scenario is prepared like a theater stage. Before even knowing someone, we already create a narrative about who they are. And when we enter a relationship, we continue representing roles: the perfect pair, the tireless lover, the ideal companion. Each gesture is molded to sustain an image. Nietzsche would understand this as an inevitable part of the human condition. For him, there exists no authentic self that shows itself naked and true. What exists are successive masks, each one necessary for us to live in society. Love, being so intense and so exposed, requires even more elaborate masks. We feign security when we are insecure. We demonstrate generosity when, deep down, we desire reciprocity. We smile when we are wounded, merely to avoid revealing weakness. But here lies the cruelty. The more we use masks, the more we confuse ourselves with them. Often we no longer know if we love the person before us or only the image we created of them. Think how many times someone falls in love with an ideal, the perfect man, the woman of their dreams, the soulmate. But when time reveals flaws, defects and contradictions, disenchantment arrives like an open wound. It is not that love has ended, it is that the mask has fallen. Nietzsche would laugh at the romantic naivety that promises to love the other as they are. For who, after all, is this other? They never show themselves completely, and we never manage to see them without the lenses of our desires and illusions. Love, therefore, is always an encounter between two masks. And this does not make it less true, merely more tragic. In modern love, this theatricality has intensified. We not only use masks before our partner, but also before the world. A couple publishes smiling photos, passionate declarations, illuminated dinners, while in intimacy there may be silence, resentment, and distance. The mask serves not only to seduce the other, but to convince ourselves that all is well. The spectacle becomes a form of survival. Nietzsche would say we should not despise these masks. They are necessary, they are part of life's game. The problem is when we become slaves to them, when we begin to believe that the character we created is more real than ourselves. At this point, love ceases to be encounter and becomes prison, two people trapped in roles they cannot abandon, fearing that the fall of the mask would reveal something intolerable. But perhaps there is also a possibility of redemption in this game. Recognizing that we all use masks can make us less cruel to each other. Instead of demanding impossible authenticity, we can accept human fragility. Loving someone is not discovering their ultimate truth, but learning to live with their multiple faces, knowing that each one is, in a certain way, a necessary invention. Imagine, for example, a couple that instead of sustaining the illusion of perfection, accepts laughing at their own masks. They know that initial passion was fed by idealizations, but they choose to continue, not because they believe in absolute fusion, but because they allow themselves to share life's theater without exaggerated illusions. This type of love is not pure, but perhaps it is stronger because it does not depend on the fall of a myth to survive. Nietzsche believed that life demands art, and love, in its deepest dimension, is also a work of art. It needs invention, metaphor, illusion. The masks, then, are not frauds but ornaments. The error lies not in using them, but in forgetting they are masks. Thus, the game of masks in modern love is not a recent deviation, but merely the most visible face of something that always existed. What has changed is the speed and intensity with which we exchange roles, the ease with which we substitute one mask for another. But deep down, we are still the same beings Nietzsche described. Creatures who cannot bear truth, who need veils to continue living, and who find in love the most seductive stage to enact their dreams. And perhaps the great question Nietzsche would leave us here is, to what extent do you love the person before you, and to what extent do you love only the mask they wear? Nietzsche distrusted any human experience that presented itself as pure happiness. For him, life is made of tension, struggle, pain, and overcoming. Love, in this sense, does not escape the rule. On the contrary, much of the force that love exerts over us comes precisely from its link with suffering. It is cruel to admit, but often we need pain to feel that we truly love. How many times have we heard someone say they only realized how much they loved when they lost? It is almost a cliché, but it reveals something profound. Love intensifies in absence, in threat, in the risk of losing what we believe to be essential. Passion is fed not only by gestures of tenderness, but also by jealousies, longings, arguments, and reconciliations. Love without pain seems to many lukewarm, without intensity. It is as if complete happiness were not sufficient to maintain the bond, needing to be tempered by the drama of loss and conflict. Nietzsche saw in this not a moral defect, but an inevitable characteristic of the human condition. We are beings who need tragedy. Life to be bearable needs contrasts. Just as music needs silence and light needs shadow, love needs pain to avoid emptying itself. Suffering functions as a constant reminder of the intensity of what we feel. It is curious to note how many relationships are built around this game of pain and pleasure. A couple fights, distances itself, feels the weight of separation, and when they reconcile, the flame of passion is reborn even stronger. Drama seems necessary to renew enchantment. Instead of destroying, suffering nourishes. It is almost as if love needed small tragedies to stay alive. Nietzsche might say this reveals love's instinctive character. It is not a rational construction of harmony and peace, but a field of forces in dispute. We love not only to feel good, but also because through pain we feel alive. Suffering gives depth to experience, makes it seem more real. In modern love, this manifests in even more intense ways. Often we confuse intensity with toxicity. There are those who seek relationships full of fights, comings and goings, because they believe constant pain is proof of true passion. Silence, calm and stability seem boring. It is as if we needed turbulence to believe that this is love. Nietzsche, however, would not invite us to romanticize this suffering. He would merely alert us. There is no love without pain. The error lies in thinking we can have only the sweet side without facing the shadows that inevitably accompany it. Passion demands risk, and every risk involves the possibility of loss and wound. Think of how many songs, poems, and love stories feed on suffering. We almost never celebrate only happy moments. We exalt longing, absence, missed encounters. Love, narrated by human culture, is almost always crossed by tragedy. This is no coincidence. It is because we feel that only pain gives grandeur to experience. Love without pain seems too small to us, almost superficial, but there is a trap here. When we begin seeking suffering as if it were the only proof of love, we lose ourselves. Nietzsche did not defend emotional masochism, but lucidity before reality. Suffering is inevitable, but it need not be artificially cultivated. It arises because love is fragile, because it involves risk, because it depends on two imperfect human beings trying to create a bond impossible to control. Pain is part of the process, not its final objective. The learning Nietzsche offers us is simple and hard. Do not flee from love's suffering, because it is a sign of life. But also do not make it an idol, as if it were the only way to feel. Pain reminds us that we love, but it cannot be the only foundation of the bond. If love becomes only wound, it loses its creative potency and transforms into resentment. What makes love such an intense experience is precisely this paradoxical mixture. It gives us pleasure and pain, joy and anguish, hope and fear. Suffering is not an error to be eliminated, but an inevitable condition of something that by nature is fragile and passing. To love is always to risk loss, and it is this risk that makes us feel the depth of experience. In the end, Nietzsche would leave us with an uncomfortable provocation. Do you love the person themselves, or do you love the pain they cause in you, the vertigo they awaken, the intensity that suffering brings? Perhaps modern love is so cruel precisely because, in secret, we need this pain to believe we are still alive. Nietzsche believed that life's essence is not the search for happiness or harmony, but the incessant struggle of forces. He called this the will to power, the impulse that moves every living being to affirm itself, expand, dominate. If we look at love from this perspective, we will see that it is not a sanctuary of peace, but a battlefield. Behind embraces, kisses, and promises, there always exists a silent dispute: who has more power over whom? In romantic discourse, we speak of equality, fusion, souls that meet without hierarchy. But Nietzsche would immediately distrust. In every loving relationship, sooner or later, someone exercises greater influence, someone dictates the rhythm more, someone bears more or less absence. There is always an imbalance, and it is this imbalance that reveals the true game of forces in progress. Just think of small daily scenes. Whoever waits for the other's message with anxiety is already in a position of fragility. Whoever manages to remain distant, cold, or indifferent exercises power. Whoever feels fear of losing places themselves at disadvantage before one who feels secure. This is not about evil or conscious manipulation, but about the inevitable dynamic of two wills to power confronting each other. Nietzsche would make us perceive that when we say, "I cannot live without you," we are actually declaring submission. And when we hear "you will never lose me," we receive, disguised as affection, a form of dominion. Love in this sense is crossed by micro-conflicts of power that hide under apparently sweet gestures. Even the act of sacrificing oneself for another can be a form of control, because it creates an invisible debt, an expectation of reciprocity. Modern love amplifies this game. In times of constant exposure, power is often measured by visibility. Who posts more photos together? Who demonstrates more affection in public? Who responds faster to messages? Everything transforms into a sign of dominion or submission. Social networks become silent arenas where couples exhibit not only their love, but also their strength within the relationship. Nietzsche would probably see in this not a perversion, but merely the contemporary form of an eternal instinct. Love was always a game of power. Kings married to consolidate territories, families united through political alliances, and even in intimate relationships, there was always a dispute over who controls the narrative, who decides when it begins and when it ends. The difference is that today, romantic illusion tries to cover this reality with sweet words. But would love then be merely war? Nietzsche might smile at the question. For him, struggle is not a sign of decadence, but of vitality. Where there is conflict, there is life. The problem lies not in love being crossed by forces of power, but in pretending it is not. By denying struggle, we create resentment, manipulation, and hidden games. By recognizing it, we can at least deal with it consciously. See how this manifests in desire. Loving someone is, in part, wanting to be desired by them. This desire is also power. The more the other desires us, the more we feel our strength grow. But when we perceive that we desire more than we are desired, we feel the pain of fragility. Love oscillates constantly between these two poles, like an unstable balance. No couple remains always in equilibrium. Nietzsche would not invite us to seek perfect equality because it is impossible. He would call us to have courage, to see the relationship as a dance of forces. Sometimes we dominate, sometimes we are dominated. The true danger lies in denying this dance, in wanting to transform it into static, in believing that love can be pure harmony without tension. Deep down, love is a game where both want to win, but also need the dispute for the bond to remain alive. If there were no power at stake, if there were no risk of losing or being subjugated, perhaps love would lose part of its intensity. It is like a fire that only burns because there is constant friction. Therefore, Nietzsche would say that love is cruel, because even when it seems to be donation, it is also imposition. Even when it seems to be surrender, it is also dominion. And perhaps most disturbing is perceiving that there is no way out. Whoever loves always seeks, at some level, to win. To love is to want the other to bend to our desire, even if gently, even if through affection and care. The question is not denying this power, but learning to inhabit it without illusions. Recognizing that every relationship is crossed by disputes can make us less naive and more lucid. It can teach us not to demand perfection, but to accept the game as it is. And perhaps the greatest power in love is not controlling the other, but bearing this truth without hiding behind masks. Because in the end, the strongest relationship is not one that eliminates struggle, but one that manages to dance with it without destroying itself. Nietzsche never wrote a relationship manual. What he did was something deeper. He unmasked the illusions surrounding love and showed how, behind sweetness, hide instincts of possession, masks, and power games. But after so much deconstruction, the inevitable question arises: what remains? If romantic love is nothing more than theater, if the promise of perfect fusion is a lie, if pain and struggle are part of experience, how can we live love in a less destructive way? Perhaps the answer lies precisely in abandoning the idea of salvation. Romantic love taught us to expect the other to complete our flaws, cure our wounds, fill our voids. This expectation, however, is the source of deepest suffering. Nietzsche would invite us to face solitude as inevitable destiny. Each human being is an island, and no relationship can completely erase this distance. The error lies in demanding from the other the impossible task of eliminating our incompleteness. Living beyond romantic love does not mean rejecting love, but freeing it from overly heavy illusions. It means seeing the bond as an encounter of two incomplete beings, conscious of their masks and instincts, but still willing to share the journey. Love need not be fusion of souls. It can be simply the daily choice to walk side by side, even knowing there are abysses between us. Nietzsche might suggest we learn to love as artists, conscious that the work will never be perfect, but still committed to the process of creation. Love then ceases to be a search for completeness and transforms into an exercise of invention. No longer a suffocating prison, but a space where two freedoms meet without pretension of annulling each other. This requires courage. Because loving without illusions means accepting that the other can leave us, can betray us, can never correspond in the exact measure we desire. It means loving knowing that control is impossible. It means bearing the pain of risk without trying to imprison the other in absolute promises. Nietzsche believed that only the strong bear truth, and this may be the most difficult truth. To love is always to risk loss. But there is beauty in this acceptance. When we do not demand perfection, we begin to value fragility. When we do not expect completeness, we manage to admire singularity. The other ceases to be a mirror of our desires and becomes someone real, with flaws, limits, and contradictions. It is in this space that love can become less illusory and more human. Love beyond romanticism is not absence of pain, but capacity not to transform pain into resentment. It is living jealousy without making it tyranny. It is accepting the mask without forgetting it is a mask. It is recognizing the possessive instinct without letting it suffocate freedom. In other words, it is loving with consciousness. Nietzsche believed that life has no meaning in itself. We are the ones who create it. The same applies to love. It carries no universal significance. It is not a law of nature carved in stone. It is a human invention, a necessary fiction. But if it is invention, then we can recreate it, mold it in new ways, more honest and less heavy. Imagine a love that does not present itself as eternal promise, but as intense presence. A love that does not seek to imprison, but to share. A love that knows of pain, but does not transform it into useless drama. This love is neither pure nor perfect, but perhaps it is more realistic, more capable of resisting time. Nietzsche would provoke us to ask, do you seek love to save yourself or to live more intensely? This difference is crucial. Whoever seeks salvation will always be disappointed, because no human being can carry this burden. But whoever seeks intensity can find in love a fertile field of experiences, even if full of flaws, pains, and imperfections. Living beyond romantic love means abandoning naivety, but not enchantment. It means accepting that life is tragic and still dancing within tragedy. It means knowing that every relationship is risk and still choosing to dive in. Not because we expect to be complete, but because in the midst of chaos, encounter with another can be one of the most beautiful experiences we have. Nietzsche would leave us, finally, with a disturbing and liberating question. Are you ready to love without illusions? We have reached the end of this journey through the cruel psychology of modern love in light of Nietzsche. What we discovered was not comforting but profoundly transformative. Love is neither purity nor harmony, but a fabric of illusions, masks, pains, and power games. It is born from our solitude, grows amid the desire for possession, feeds on suffering, and reveals itself as a field of struggle. Still, Nietzsche does not invite us to abandon love, but to live it with lucidity. What we learned is that loving is not seeking completeness, but creating meaning even within fragility. It is not expecting salvation, but sharing risk. Love need not be total illusion. It can be conscious encounter of two imperfect freedoms that choose to walk together. This vision does not eliminate pain, but makes it bearable, even beautiful, because it is in pain that life's intensity is revealed. And now I ask you, what illusion about love has most imprisoned you until today? What city are you watching from? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and let me know where you're tuning in from. If this philosophical dive moved you in any way, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel.